If you want to leave your bag down by the table. Oh, thanks, Bernie.
Wait, he might go. Maybe I lost
Is it
my
on the
phone.
table with the flowers? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, the way you're like, would you like? Can we have water? Oh yeah, because my throat is scratchy. I'm sorry. No, you're good.
No, we're just gonna keep going up and on.
I have to use the restroom, Bernie.
We'll never start. It'll be great.
Your mom's. No, I'm just kidding. Oh. I was like, that's so cute. No, but my sister's here.
You know how to advance? I'm not advancing your slide for you, right? Should I advance her slide to her slide?
When you're done, why don't you just go ahead and click the green button
Great.
to intro the
That-
next one?
That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
Like, what? How do I do that?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just the green button to advance the
Yep.
slide.
Yeah, and if you need to go backwards for any reason, it's the little red one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go around.
Good.
Participants.
Okay. All right, welcome everybody. I think we have a few more wandering in. Thanks so much for coming. Welcome everyone to the NACCR 2026 Education Forum. We are so excited to have you all here. Awesome. All right, so this forum is being put on by the SCB&A Education Committee. The mission of SCB&A's Education Committee is to serve the interests of educators, students, and members interested in advancing conservation science and practice through the development of education resources and professional development opportunities. And this includes through activities like technical skill building via workshops and online webinars, career development opportunities via panel discussion with experts and mentoring events, as well as other social and networking events. And this is our education committee. You can see our various education committee members on the screen, almost all of whom are here today. So a big thank you to the education committee for putting together this forum. We are always looking for new folks to join the education committee. So if this is something that you are interested in doing, we would absolutely love to have you join. You can email us at education@scbnorthamerica.org. So this is a pretty new initiative for SCB&A's Education Committee, and we're really excited that this is actually the first in-person version of this forum. The first ever Conservation Education Forum was held virtually this past August 5th and 6th of 2025. And it was a really big success. It was a great couple of days. And out of that, we decided that we would like to continue that into an in-person format for this conference. So this is the first one we're doing in person. The format is going to be 8 presenters, and each of those 8 presenters are going to be giving us a 5-minute kind of speed presentation, a little preview talk And then after you've gotten to hear from each of those presenters, there will then be 1 hour workshops. So you'll get to hear what all of them are going to be presenting on, and then you can choose out of those 8 which of those workshops you would like to attend. So we'd love to know if this format works for you. We'd love to also hear what you would like to see us do next. So we are going to ask, after you've had a chance to hear all of the presenters and after you've had a chance to engage in the workshops, if you could please take the post-event survey. The QR code is on the screen. You can scan it now and then take the survey later, but we would love to get your feedback so we can keep growing programs like this into the future. And now I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, who is going to share about a different survey that we would also love for you all to take.
Hi there. My name is Suzanne Macy. I'm the Assistant Director for Capacity Development at the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation at the American Museum of Natural History. Just wanted to pause to take a moment to tell you that we have a survey going on right now that's really trying to understand what it is educators need in the classroom right now, what they need for their classroom, and what their students need from their classroom. So it's a 10-minute survey. We encourage you to scan that QR code now, take it, do it later. There's also a poster out in the hall. You can come by and scan it at that point too. I also just want to mention that building off of the virtual education forum that happened last year, the Network of Conservation Educators and Practitioners, or NCEP as we call it, has begun to do some publication of the resources that are presented in educator forums. So we're excited that in our next issue of Lessons in Conservation, one of the authors that presented at last year's education forum is going to be able to have it open and available, open access resource for all to be able to download and use in their classrooms. If you are interested as authors presenting here today, or those in the audience who have educational resources and interested in publishing in a peer-reviewed journal and joining our online collection of over 200 resources, I encourage you to check us out. And or if you're an educator looking for resources, please just go to ncep.amnh.org to learn more. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to our first speaker.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Simmons. I come to you today from just down the road in the 3rd Ward at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, where I teach natural science to art and design students who are completing their BFA program. It's an interesting place to work and interact with students who are coming into their own and trying to figure out where they fit into the world around them and how they can make a change in what they see. And so I start here today with a picture from one of my favorite books, The Lorax. We read it very first day of my class, where we talk about the environmental movement and how far we've come and how much more work we actually have to do. So what I've been noticing in recent years is that my students are becoming increasingly more climate anxiety based. I think there is a place for that in each and every one of us. And what they are trying to do is understand what is happening in the world around them. And how do they make a change? Do they need to speak up? Do they need to create and make things? Do they need to invent things? Is there a way to engage these students a little bit differently? And because of these tumultuous times, as I think we can all agree upon, it's been an interesting time for the students, and trying to think of the best way to engage them has been a bit of a challenge, but I think I figured a way through it. For my students, what I do is I introduce some of the basic environmental policies that we have basically created what we use to exist today, starting with some prehistory from before 1970, leading all the way through the 1980s, 90s, aughts, and so on. And with that, our students are getting exposed to things that they might reflect on and say, well, that didn't exist when my mom was a child. I've had that same experience where I'm like, what do you mean we didn't have that type of regulation? And the students start to put things together. Using those as basis for their own self-selected topics, they're free to choose one of the pre-established environmental policies and do self-conducted research, or they can select from a long list of proposed amendments and changes to environmental policy that have been put into play since January of 2025, which I curated a wonderful list that we can explore during my workshop. But also, in putting together their research and presenting their work, they're also tasked with creating a made piece to communicate a portion of their research. And 2 examples of the works from my students this past spring are shown for you on the slide. One of them was an advocacy poster, basically saying, hey, we have these amazing lakes, let's make sure we protect them. And the other was made using found materials. The student is a new studio practice fine arts major, and they like to work with a lot of found materials, and their focus was on timber regulation, and so they were using pieces that had been broken previously, but also some of the woods that they had now come to appreciate a little bit more in their creative practice. So, in my workshop, like I said, we can explore different policies. I'll go over the modules and some of the ways that I approach things with the students and help them connect more with what they've experienced, what they will experience, and what they would like to make change with. So join me in 206A after the session, and I'll see you there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maggie. Hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to talk to you about data reliability in botanical community science. And that's what we'll cover in the workshop later today. So my goals here are to talk with you about training design that is appropriate for adults. And that includes like andragogy as a concept. And we're going to learn how to use a dichotomous key. Raise your hand if you've ever used one. Oh, that's so great. I told my family, I was like, there's a lot of botanists here. But there are dichotomous keys for all kinds of organisms, right? And so we're going to learn how to use that. And we're also going to think about the use of iNaturalist. Raise your hand if you use iNaturalist. Yay. Hopefully, if you don't, by 5:45, you will be convinced to do so. One of the greatest social networks on the planet, millions of people participating. And of course, you can't really learn anything if you don't engage socially, so I hope we have fun and build our professional networks. And this is an interesting place to be in because I normally teach, right? But I'm going to be talking about teaching. And so I will be modeling the way. And that's part of my favorite leadership book, The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner, right? We always have to be modeling the way. And that's what we hope to do in community science, right? The scientists lead the way and help everyone else come along with them. There are many assumptions associated with this work, and I have 2 degrees, one in biology and one in education. So I think somewhere along the way I realized I was always doing restoration ecology with volunteers. And so how I treated them was part of that reliability conversation. In the literature, we tend to focus on who makes a good community scientist and or the cost benefit analysis of their participation. But I like to think more internally about it and encourage people to consider what are you doing to train people to become reliable data collectors. And so for this, I really will lean on backwards design, which is a principle of education theory about how you could develop your learning outcomes first, and then your assessments, and then your learning activities. And the example I like to give is, have you ever been in a lecture class and the professor just starts talking about their trip to Timbuktu, and you're thinking, why does this matter? And so this is what backwards design does. It helps us as educators really focus our messaging towards the learning outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. Also, adults are not children, right? So we learn a lot about pedagogy, but we really need to think about andragogy, helping adults learn. And the way adults learn is they like to solve real world problems with practical tasks and bring their prior knowledge to that effort. And so we'll focus on the strengths of the people who participate and how that makes them motivated to participate. Another thing that I like to focus on is this idea that like you don't need a PhD to make a difference in the world of restoration ecology. That helps you to understand the conceptual environment. But really, if you want someone to collect data, they're performing a procedural task. And there's a lot of literature in the military, defense, and medical fields that show that strong training results in highly accurate outcomes. And finally, we want to think about deductive learning, right? I thought for many years that you just picked this thing up and you started on page 1 while you were sitting in a field. But normally we have a need to know, right? And so we can start from a place of knowledge with mentors, including iNaturalist, not just from an inductive, pure state. So do you like to hang out with your friends? Do you like to use iNaturalist? Do you like plants? If so, please join my talk. And even if you don't decide to join my talk, I hope that you'll contact me later and we can continue the conversation. Thank you.
That's actually perfect because we're kind of like bookends of the education spectrum. You are working with adults and I work with early learners, children ages 0 to 8. I forgot to click. So my name is Alicia Hyland and today I'm going to be, first, thank you for inviting me here to be with you all today. I really appreciate it. And today I'm going to be sharing and modeling an education model for early learners, STEM-based, for belonging to biodiversity, a child-led play-based native plant restoration module for early learners. So I imagine most of the folks in this room understand the native plant restoration question, but maybe not, oh, I messed up, it's okay. Not so many of you understand the early childhood question. And so I'm gonna get to that after I give myself a little more introduction. Again, my name is Alicia Hyland. I'm a classroom and conservation educator for 10 plus years, former field biologist. I run my own very small nonprofit, Tiny Green Learning, that provides nature-based education for early learners and their families, and I'm also a STEM PD facilitator. So back to the why early childhood education. So research actually suggests that environmental stewardship begins long before students start to learn ecological facts, maybe in middle school, high school, even college. Rather, it develops through repeated joyful experiences in nature that foster lasting sense of connection and belonging. You know, so people, us, we develop our love of nature and STEM early in our lives through repeated play-based experiences. So that's a perfect place in my idea, not mine, a lot of people's ideas to start with restoration. And so this learning module adapts several STEM learning strategies that are particularly successful for young learners. They're successful for all learners, including play-based learning, in which children learn best through hands-on exploration and discovery, place-based learning, which connects learning to students' community, environment, culture, and people, project-based learning, in which students solve real-world problems, and inquiry-based learning, in which students are empowered to ask questions and find solutions. And then this is all goes alongside a theory of change that moves students from a sense of helps students develop a sense of cultural belonging and moves them along a pathway towards stewardship identity. To begin, students are grounded in a restoration space by making cultural connections. Alongside those cultural connections with repeated play-based experiences, they start to develop an emotional attachment to a place. And this emotional attachment actually facilitates a deeper understanding of the ecological concepts that maybe some folks think that kids aren't quite able to grasp, but they really are. And now with both the motivation and the knowledge, students are able to more actively participate in a restoration-based activity, and that contributes to a lifelong development of stewardship identity. So kind of a peek inside the unit, 6 lessons. So if you're a classroom educator, you can implement this in about 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 1 to 2 45-minute sessions a week. Moving from just the idea of what is restoration, native plant restoration, and developmentally appropriate terms for young children, all the way through a restoration action and reflection activity with embedded assessments and big questions driving along the way. But in the spirit of what I do, we're actually going to dive more deeply into the curriculum through play. So in my workshop, if you choose to join me, we'll be doing a curriculum overview, crash course in play-based learning, some messy STEM, you might get a little dirty, reflection and planning, and some handouts. So I hope that you're excited to join me if you're excited about nature-based learning and play in early childhood. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Kara Nelson from University of Montana, here to tell you what's behind door number 4. I really want to thank SCB North America and the Education Committee for creating this space for discussion among educators. It's really a fantastic opportunity. I am presenting a semester-long education module that we have tested at University of Montana to train students in effective restoration practices based on the UN Decade Standards of Practice for Ecosystem Restoration, which is an initiative that I've spent about 5 years working on. So for me, working on the standards of practice and realizing that the opportunity to utilize the standards of practice to engage students in understanding effective restoration right in that initial coursework is a powerful tool. However, these standards and this training module could be adapted for K through 12 or professional workshops or really any level. Okay, why teach standards of practice? We have an amazing opportunity with restoration. It's also a huge challenge. We hope our kids' look back and say they made good decisions. What are standards of practice for ecosystem restoration? The UN Decade Standards cover all types of restorative activities, from reducing pollution in cities, sustainable agriculture, all the way to ecological restoration. And of course, with this wide array of restorative activities, we need standards to know what is restorative, meaning resulting in net gain for nature and people, versus not on the restorative continuum. And so these standards of practice were adopted by the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration in 2024, and they form the basis of the education module. All right, what are the learning objectives of this education module? There are several. After completing the module, students can describe the key components and subcomponents of ecosystem restoration. And more than that, they can understand why these components are strategic, as well as the role and importance of the individual recommended practices. The heart of the project, what they learn, what they can do, is they can evaluate a project's alignment with the UN Decade Standards of Practice. This is just to entice you to learn a little bit more behind door number 4, which is in room 208A. This is for the monitoring and evaluation component. So the students do an appraisal, and then they end up appraising against each of these subcomponents within the standards of practice. And then finally, the students design a plan they can design a strategic plan for effective restoration. Why choose to come to this education forum session? First, if you haven't delved into the standards of practice for the UN decade, again, for the whole restorative continuum, if you come to the session, you will get a good overview. Second, if you're an educator and you want a high impact experiential learning module for teaching about restoration, we have one that we hope you'll be interested in. We also need your help in improving the education module, so please come and let us know if you're interested in engaging. And then finally, it's an opportunity to network with other restoration educators. So thanks very much. We're in room 208A.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra DeCandia and I'm teaching faculty at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. The module that I'm going to be talking about is how we can engage our students with controversial topics in the classroom. And the example I'm going to use is an introductory biology lab that I teach to first-year students every year, called Red Wolves on Trial. So the motivation for this module is the simple fact that biology is really messy. Ecology, evolution, conservation, restoration, these are all fields that are dynamic, constantly changing, and fuel a lot of controversies within the scientific community, but also within the general public. We live in this era right now of really intense political and social polarization, and that creates an environment where sometimes students are uncomfortable sharing their opinions on these controversial topics. But what I've found is that if we adopt a play-acting approach, it lessens the social stakes and it allows students to engage more deeply with different perspectives on these controversial issues. So the one that I'm going to focus on in my workshop is Red Wolves on Trial. And essentially, we're addressing this question of should red wolves be protected under the U.S. Endangered Species Act? And the reason that I teach this module is because I want my first-year undergraduates to engage with the fact that we have lots of different species concepts. Defining a species is not an easy thing to do, and that has implications for how we manage them as well. So the way that this works is I start by presenting a hypothetical scenario to my class, and I divide them into two teams. Our plaintiff is defenders of wildlife, who argue that red wolves should be protected because they are a distinct species. And our defense team is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which claims that red wolves are an interspecies hybrid that do not warrant protection. Within each of those teams, I divide my students into one of three roles. We have our opening and closing statement attorneys who provide a big overview of the argument their team plans to make over the course of the trial. We've got three expert witnesses who draw their testimony from the scientific literature so that they can provide evidence to support those arguments. And then we have witness attorneys who lead direct and cross-examination of the attorneys to try to pull out the testimony that's most useful to their team. The run of show has a lot of different parts to it. First, I have pre-reading so that everyone has the basic understanding of the overview topic as well as some of the nuances of this particular system. Then, when they come to class, they engage with a collaboration period where they get to work with their teammates to develop their arguments so that they have one cohesive thread throughout the trial. Then we have the trial itself with lots of pomp and circumstance. I usually come dressed in my PhD robes so I can be the judge. I've got my TAs serve as this jury in the side. And my students have to get up and deliver the various statements, the questions, and the answers as if we were in a courtroom. Then we have the decision where either I'll have my teaching team help out as a jury or I'll ask students to vote for which side they think should win based on arguments. Spoiler alert, they always vote for their own team, so I recommend having a third-party jury if you can. And then the last part is a reflection period, where students get to write about what their personal opinion on the resolution is. This is something that only I will read, and so it's an opportunity for them to really grapple with the different sides of the issue and come up with an evidence-based answer to the question. Now, one of the things I want to emphasize is that this is a really highly customizable framework. It's one that I currently teach in 3 different ways. So I've mentioned the mock trial in my intro class. I also teach a mid-level ecology course where we do this twice. We have one formal debate on whether or not we should resurrect the woolly mammoth through de-extinction technology. And new this year, we're going to have a congressional hearing on whether we should build a data center near national parklands in Northern Virginia. This one is particularly relevant to our context in DC, since Northern Virginia is considered to be one of the data center capitals of the world. But truly, you can adapt the format and the topic to any setting and any topic of interest. So, if you decide to come to my implementation workshop, we're going to do 3 things. First, we are going to step into this activity by breaking into the plaintiff and defense, getting an opportunity to work with your team, and deliver an opening statement like the ones we see in these trials. And if you know nothing about red wolves, do not stress. I've got a little information packet so that everyone's up to speed. Next, we've got the customization period. This is the meat and potatoes of the workshop, where I've got a worksheet that'll help you think about your specific context, your students, what you want to convey, and what format might be most helpful for doing that. Lastly, we'll have a feedback section where we'll share out these ideas so that we can give each other feedback, but also so that all of us can get ideas for other ways and topics that we could implement in our own classes. So if you are interested in reaching out to me, 1 QR code's for my lab website, and if you're interested in participating in the workshop, or not participating but getting all of the materials anyway, you can use the other QR code for a Google Drive. Hope to see you in the workshop in the next hour. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think I can safely speak for my colleagues to say that none of us want to do our own workshops because we want to go to each other's. But nevertheless, I will tell you what I have planned. My name is Heather Galindo. I am also teaching faculty at the University of Washington, Bothell. We are a small, primarily undergraduate institute. We have a little over 6,000 undergrads. So one of the things I noticed as I started to see students transition out of their lab-based courses where they're really focused, understandably, on gaining research skills in terms of following methodologies, collecting and analyzing data, interpreting results, as they moved into some of the higher division courses, like some of the ones that I teach, when they were presented with the opportunity to design their own questions and design their own projects, it was a little bit challenging, even for the students who had really mastered those skills in the laboratory classes. And one of the things they were missing is understanding how to learn about the context of a field so that they could build upon that with their own project. The other thing particularly relevant to what a lot of us have been talking about is the added pressure of feeling like you need to design this project that is somehow going to solve all the things. Is something I think they carry. And so that sense of what scale even makes sense, especially as you're getting to know what it means to be a research scientist. And so I try to shift the focus a little bit more to an approach of curiosity and creativity, thinking about just what are we observing in these environments and what kind of mysteries might you like to solve? And then yes, we will get to how it fits into this larger picture. So the place that science communication comes in for me is really starting with a very simple framework, and I doubt any of the things on this slide are news to any of you, but I try to have this consistent framework where anytime we read about or talk about or plan a project, we make sure that students are able to address all 5 of these questions. So what is the question that's being asked? Why was it asked? And then we have our methods and results, and then how is it useful? And the 2 that I have highlighted in orange here are the places that I see students struggle the most as they sort of move into, for example, field-based research projects and moving out of the lab. So these questions I really used to frame a series of 6 assignments. And for those of you who have the luxury of a semester, I'm jealous of you, we have 10-week quarters. And so these 6 assignments, which do include 2 field trips, do fit within a 10-week quarter, but a lot of these assignments you could pull out and fit into any course as you think they would be helpful, depending on what kind of field-based research you're having your students do. And so we really start with helping students understand context. How do you navigate the scientific literature in a way that is not comprehensive, but is practical and useful? And then I lead them through a series of activities in which they first actually get to design a project that they don't have to do. And so we really move through taking an assignment or two to think about navigating the literature, thinking about what it takes to propose a project, and then actually moving through getting some field experience, designing a project, and then moving into communicating their results by the end of class. And I do want to note that in this class, we also do a lot of content-based learning, and so if you have a class where this feels like it might take up everything, as I said, you can pick and choose, and we do also a lot of content-based learning in this class as well. This is a marine biology class. So the assignments that I take them through, first I have them create a graphical abstract from a peer-reviewed piece of research, and that helps them to really focus on what are the most important pieces and how do we translate that into a more visual format. I have them work in teams to create a project that they do. Essentially, it's a crowdfunding proposal, so you're not pitching to agencies, you're actually pitching to someone who might donate on a website, and this kind of lessens the pressure, and this is not the project they are going to do, and so they start to get used to what it feels like to brainstorm. We take them out in the field, we teach them their tools, what kinds of questions they can ask, and then they move into the last three steps, which are likely more familiar. They work in teams to come up with their proposal. We go back out into the field, they collect data, and then they write that up as a final report and presentation. So in my workshop, and I won't pretend to remember what room I'm in, so please consult your guides. Depending on the size of the crowd we have and who's there, I'm happy to be flexible. We can go through all six, or we can kind of pick or choose. So if this sounds like it could be helpful for any classes you teach, I invite you to come visit me in whatever room we will be in. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. We've got another controversial one for you here. So my workshop is titled Beyond the Facts, Scientific Literacy, Scientific Literacy, Science Denialism, and the Ethics of Managing Invasive Species. We'll be taking a trip to Australia to examine this. So I'm a teaching stream professor at the University of Toronto, focusing a lot on conservation policy, scientific literacy. I've been there for about 10 years now. My research background is on plant invasion ecology, so not so much mammals and the controversial ones, but I find it fascinating. And I am trying to get students to graduate not only with the knowledge of biodiversity and scientific literacy, but also including some perspectives and understanding and a competence of socio-cultural complexity that surrounds a lot of these types of problems. So we'll be taking a trip to Australia, as I said, to examine this question: are brumbies, which are these beautiful horses here, are they feral invasive horses that should be subject to population management, or are they an essential part of the cultural landscape? This is a very real, current, ongoing debate happening as we speak in Australia. So should we take them out of this landscape, or do they seem to be part of it and belong there? So I'll tell you a little bit about the story here, the history of brumbies. We'll talk about who's involved, why should we care? I'm curious to hear your perspective on this too. What does evidence mean in this case? And I'll give you some different sources to look at to consider that. And ultimately, what should we do? So population management is happening right now, but I'm curious to see how interaction with different types of evidence may or may not change your perspective. So we'll do this in a condensed active learning exercise, engaging with diverse opinions, some opportunities for reflection, and some opportunities for adaptation in your own teaching or research. So these are some of the resources that you'll be examining. They're relatively small, but I'll ask you to do a little bit of reading. And we're talking about conservation of the native ecosystem in Australia, invasive species impact assessment, animal welfare. You may have come across the term compassionate conservation in your reading. Controversial, but definitely part of the conversation that we should all be familiar with. And whether or not science denialism is at play here, or if we can think about it as epistemic or ethical disagreement. And in my mind, this is all part of scientific literacy, and we should be graduating students that are comfortable having that discussion. as difficult as it may be. And on that note, I just want to put up a warning that I've run this workshop in my classrooms a couple times, and students do get emotional. It can evoke a strong emotional response. And so if you're taking part in the workshop today, just a warning that that might happen, and it does happen. And part of running that workshop is navigating that as the instructor, which I'm happy to do. So that's that for me. I'll be in 204B, I believe. Thanks very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Mannix. I have our last one for the day. So I'm with Compass Science Communication. We are a nonprofit science communication organization. We believe that science and strategic communication is a really powerful tool for change, and that science and information have a very important role to play in helping us understand the world around us and the decisions that we make about it. So science communication has changed a lot since we got started. We became an organization 25 years ago, and when we started, we were really about why should you communicate? Why is that important? As we've evolved, we are now more, we do more about the how do you communicate, what does that look like? And as we move into this world of AI, misinformation, disinformation, those needs keep changing and we keep evolving as well. So right now, our approach to strategic communication and collaboration, it boils down to kind of three main principles of communication. One is paying attention, so not just to the surface, but also to what's under it. Paying attention to the people you're trying to communicate with, paying attention to yourself, how you're responding, and to the situation, the timing, and what matters the most. Our second principle is listening to understand, so really important. How do we understand the audience that we're trying to communicate with? This is easier said than done. It takes some practice. And finally, we believe in communicating to build relationships. So this includes making sure you're communicating in ways that are meaningful, relevant, and useful for actual people. So we take this approach and we follow these principles because we want to live in a world where people and places thrive together. That's what we're trying to build. No one can accomplish this by themselves, so that's why communication and collaboration are so very important. We work to create spaces where that's possible and bring people together to explore these approaches and possibilities for how they share what they know, and the kind of efforts that they want to be involved in. So on a practical basis, this means we do science communication trainings and workshops, and then we also help to connect audiences together for shared learning. This can include scientists, but also journalists and decision makers. And so the premise of our workshop is that good communicators are made, not born. So there's a lot of skill building and practice that come along with all of those principles. And you can make your work compelling too if you if we can build those skills. And so the message box is our kind of foundational tool that helps us do that. It helps us sift down the mountain of information that we may bring to a topic and make it relevant to our audience so that we can do those great collaborations, we can communicate and make change. And that's because when sharing our research as people with technical expertise, technical backgrounds, we typically work from the ground up, right? Scientists share background information, describe a research process, and then the results. That's how we're trained to work. That's what it looks like. But to people who are unfamiliar, some of my words disappeared in the translation. That's kind of important. Anyway, the blue triangle flips that on its head. The result is at the top. The so what is in the middle. Why do we care? And then the background or supporting details are at the bottom. So the message box is what we're going to focus on in my session. We're going to learn how to use it. And this message box has a lot of different options. It can be something that can complement a course if you're teaching. It can also be something that you use in your everyday work. Like I said, I've been teaching the message box for about 12 years, and one of my favorite things is when someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, I just used the message box last week when I prep for an interview with a journalist." So this is a really flexible tool that you can use in a lot of different ways. So come and join me. We'll have as much fun as these guys are having. We will spend a little bit of time learning about the message box, an example, and then you'll have time to practice and share with others. And if you can't make it, because there's a lot of awesome competition up here for you, so I understand, there's a couple other ways to connect with us while we're here. I'm leading a session specifically on communicating risk on Wednesday. And then if you just want to chat, if that's more your style, you just want to support communications, join us for a social hour on Wednesday. Thanks.
All right, let's have one more round of applause for all of these fantastic speakers. Thank you all so much. So we are now going to enter into the workshop portion of the Education Forum. So we ask you all, I know it's a really hard choice. There are so many fantastic options. So you all now have to make that really tough choice and go pick one of those workshops downstairs on the second floor, and we will see you all there. And thanks again for joining us today.